and so afterwards there would be a panel of cyber experts to comment on the general's remarks. And so to moderate that panel, our moderator tonight is David Sanger, an old friend of the Aspen Institute and the Aspen Security Forum in particular, the chief Washington correspondent for the New York Times, a cybersecurity expert himself, and the author of the new book, The Perfect Weapon: War, Sabotage, and Fear in the Cyber Age. With that, first of all, please join me in welcoming and thanking the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein.
Well, thank you very much. Good afternoon. It's a great privilege. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. All right, it is nice to get out of Washington every once in a while. And it's a great privilege to be here with you. But we meet today at a fraught moment. For too long, along with other nations, we enjoyed the extraordinary benefits of modern technology without adequately preparing for its considerable risks. Director of National Intelligence Dan Coates, who I know was here earlier today, elevated the alarm last week when he stated that the digital infrastructure of this country is literally under attack. And that's one of the few instances where the word literally is used literally and accurately. Our adversaries are developing cyber tools not only to steal our secrets and to mislead our citizens, but also to disable our infrastructure by gaining control of computer networks. Every day, malicious cyber actors infiltrate computers and accounts of individual citizens, businesses, the military, and all levels of government. Director Coates revealed that our adversaries target government and businesses in the energy, nuclear, water, aviation, and critical manufacturing sectors. They cause billions of dollars in losses, they pre-position cyber tools for future attacks, and they try to degrade our political system. So combating cyber crime and cyber-enabled threats is a top priority of the Department of Justice. Attorney General Sessions established a cyber digital task force in February, and he challenged it to answer two questions. What are we doing now to address cyber threats, and how can we do better? Today, the Department of Justice is releasing a report that responds to the first question, providing a detailed assessment of the cyber threats confronting America and the department's efforts to combat them. The task force report addresses a wide range of issues, including how to define the multifaceted challenges of cyber-enabled crime, how to develop strategies to detect, deter, and disrupt them, how to inform victims and the public about the threats they face, and how to maintain a skilled workforce to detect and to respond to cyber threats. The report describes 6 categories of cyber threats and explains how the Department of Justice is working to combat them. One serious type of threat involves direct damage to computer systems, such as distributed denial of service attacks and ransomware schemes. Another category is data theft, which includes stealing personally identifiable information and intellectual property. The third category encompasses cyber-enabled fraud schemes. A fourth category includes threats to personal privacy, such as sextortion, blackmail, and other forms of harassment. Attacks on critical infrastructure constitute the fifth category. They include infiltrating energy systems, transportation systems, and telecommunications networks. Each of those complex and evolving threats is serious, and the report details the important work the Department of Justice is doing to protect America. But I plan to focus today on a sixth category of cyber-enabled threats, malign foreign influence operations, which are described in Chapter 1 of the task force report that I know the panel is prepared to discuss following my remarks. The term malign foreign influence operations refers to actions undertaken by a foreign government, often covertly, to influence people's opinions and advance the foreign nation's strategic objectives. The goals frequently include exacerbating social divisions and undermining confidence in democratic institutions. Influence operations are a form of information warfare. Covert propaganda and disinformation are the primary weapons. The Russian effort to influence the 2016 presidential campaign is just one tree in a growing forest. Focusing merely on a single election misses the point. As Director Coates made clear, these actions are persistent, they are pervasive, they are meant to undermine democracy on a daily basis, regardless of whether it is election time or not. Russian intelligence officers did not stumble on the idea of hacking American computers and posting misleading messages because they had a free afternoon. It's what they do every day, not just attacking America, but other countries as well. And this is not a new phenomenon. Throughout the 20th century, the Soviet Union used malign influence campaigns against the United States and other countries. In 1963, for example, the KGB paid an American to distribute a book claiming that the FBI and the CIA assassinated President Kennedy. In 1980, the KGB fabricated and distributed a fake document claiming that the National Security Council had a strategy to prevent political activists from working with African leaders. During the Reagan administration, the KGB spread false stories that the Pentagon developed the AIDS virus as part of a biological weapons research program. As Jonathan Swift wrote in 1710, falsehood flies, and the truth comes limping after it. Now, the Reagan administration confronted the problem head-on. It established an interagency committee called the Active Measures Working Group to counter Soviet disinformation. That group exposed Soviet forgeries and other propaganda. Modern technology vastly expands the speed and effectiveness of disinformation campaigns. The internet and social media platforms allow foreign agents to spread misleading political messages while masquerading as Americans. Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen explained last weekend that our adversaries use social media, sympathetic spokespeople, and other fronts to sow discord and divisiveness among the American people. Elections provide an attractive opportunity for foreign influence campaigns to influence our political processes. According to the intelligence community's assessment, foreign interference in the 2016 election demonstrated a significant escalation in directness, level of activity, and scope of effort compared to previous operations. The Department's Cyber Digital Task Force report contributes to our understanding by identifying 5 different types of malign influence operations that target our political circumstances. First, malicious cyber actors can target election infrastructure by trying to hack voter registration databases and vote tallying systems. In 2016, we know that 5 foreign cyber intruders targeted election-related networks in as many as 21 states. There's no evidence that any foreign government has ever altered vote totals, but the risk connection. Fourth, adversaries covertly use disinformation and other propaganda to influence American political opinion. Foreign trolls spread false stories online about candidates and issues, amplify divisive political messages to make them appear more pervasive and credible, and try to pit groups against each other. They may also try to affect voter behavior by triggering protests or depressing voter turnout. Finally, foreign governments use overt influence efforts, such as government-controlled media outlets and paid lobbyists. Those tactics may be employed lawfully if the foreign agents comply with registration requirements, but people should be aware when lobbyists or media outlets are working for a foreign government so they can evaluate the source's credibility. When respected figures offer opinions about public policy issues, it may matter to know that they are taking instructions from a foreign government. The election interference charges filed in February demonstrate how easily human trolls can distribute propaganda and disinformation. A Russian man, not charged in the case, recently admitted to a reporter that he worked with the trolls. In a separate department, his job was to create fake news for his own country. He felt like a character in the book 1984 by George Orwell, a place where you have to write that black is white and white is black. You were in some kind of factory that turned lying into an industrial assembly line. The volumes were colossal. There were huge numbers of people, 300 to 400, and they were all writing absolute untruths. When the man took a test for promotion to the department that focused on America, he explained the main thing was showing that you are able to represent yourself as an American. Now, that former troll said that he believes Russian audiences pay no attention to fake internet comments. But he has a different opinion about Americans. He thinks that we can be deceived because Americans, quote, aren't used to this kind of trickery. Now, that remark is sort of a compliment. I say that because in repressive regimes, people simply assume that the government controls media outlets and they discount everything. We live in a country that allows free speech, so people are accustomed to taking it seriously when their fellow citizens express their opinions. But not everyone realizes that information posted on the internet may not even come from citizens. Moreover, internet comments may not even come from human beings. Automated bots magnify the impact of propaganda. Using software to mimic actions by human users, bots can circulate messages automatically, creating the appearance that thousands of people are reading and forwarding information within minutes. Together, bots and networks of paid trolls operating multiple accounts allow foreign agents to quickly spread disinformation and create the false impression that it is widely accepted in America. The United States is not alone in confronting malign foreign influence operations. Russia reportedly conducted a hack and release campaign against President Macron during last year's French elections and instituted similar operations against political candidates in other European democracies. Other foreign nations, besides Russia, also engage in malign operations. So what can we do to defend our values in the face of foreign efforts to influence elections, weaken the social fabric, and turn Americans against each other? Like terrorism and other national security threats, the malign foreign influence threat requires a unified strategic approach across all government agencies. In particular, the Departments of Justice, Homeland Security, State, Defense, Treasury, along with intelligence agencies and others, play important roles. But other sectors of society also need to do their part. State and local governments must secure their election infrastructure. Technology companies need to protect their platforms. Public officials, campaigns, and other potential victims need to study the threats and protect themselves and their networks. And citizens need to understand the playing field. The Department of Justice investigates and prosecutes malign foreign influence activity when it violates federal criminal law. Some critics argue against prosecuting people who live in foreign countries that are unlikely to extradite their citizens. I think that's a short-sighted view. For one thing, the defendants may someday face trial if there's a change in their government or if they visit any nation that cooperates with America in enforcing the rule of law. Modern forms of travel and communication readily allow criminals to cross national boundaries. Do not underestimate the long arm of American law or the resolve of American law enforcement. People who Thank you. There are plenty of people who thought they were safely under the protection of foreign governments when they committed crimes against America, but they later find themselves in American prisons. Second, public indictments achieve specific deterrence by impeding the defendants from traveling to rule of law nations and by raising the risk that they will be held accountable for future cybercrimes. Wanted criminals are less attractive as employees and co-conspirators. Third, demonstrating our ability to detect and charge hackers will deter some others from attacking America. Fourth, federal indictments are taken seriously by the public and the international community, where respect for our criminal justice system, including an understanding of the presumption of innocence and the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt, means that our willingness to present evidence to a grand jury and ultimately a trial elicits a high degree of confidence in our allegations. Fifth, victims deserve vindication, particularly when they are harmed by criminal acts that would normally be prosecuted if the perpetrators were located here in the United States. And sixth, federal criminal prosecutions support other penalties for malign foreign influence operations. For example, the Department of Treasury can impose financial sanctions on defendants based on evidence exposed in indictments. Voters in foreign democracies and influential citizens in autocratic regimes can consider these allegations in making decisions about their national leadership and foreign alliances. The Department of the Treasury imposed sanctions on the individuals and entities identified in our February election interference indictment, along with others involved in malign influence activities. 19 individuals and 5 entities are subject to sanctions that freeze assets under American jurisdiction, which, I remind you, is vast. Even if those people are never brought to court, they will face consequences. The sanctions prohibit them from engaging in transactions with Americans and using the American financial system. The administration followed up with similar sanctions for a broad range of malign activities against 7 oligarchs, 12 companies, 17 Russian government officials, and 2 other entities. So prosecutions are one useful tool against modern criminals who operate beyond our shores. That same approach applies outside the context of election interference. That's why our government regularly files charges against criminals who hide overseas, such as the Iranian government hackers who broke into a computer network of a dam, the Iranian hackers who infiltrated American universities, businesses, and government agencies on behalf of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the Iranian hacker who infiltrated and extorted an American television network, the Chinese government hackers who committed economic espionage, and Russian intelligence officers who stole data from an email service provider. Intelligence assessments and criminal indictments are based on evidence. They do not reflect mere guesses. Intelligence assessments, of course, include analytical judgments based on classified information that cannot be disclosed, because the evidence is from sources, people who will be unable to help America in the future if they are identified, and who might be harmed in retaliation for helping America, and intelligence methods, techniques that would be worthless if our adversaries knew how we obtain the evidence. Indictments are based on credible evidence that the government must be prepared to introduce in court if necessary. Now, some people believe that they can operate anonymously through the internet, but cybercrime generally does create electronic trails that lead to the perpetrators if the investigators are sufficiently skilled. Now, gathering intelligence about our adversaries, people who threaten our way of life, is a noble task. Outside the Department of Justice headquarters, just outside my window, stands a statue of Nathan Hale. Hale was executed immediately without a trial after he was caught gathering intelligence for America during the Revolutionary War. His final words are recorded as follows: "I am so satisfied with the cause in which I have engaged that my only regret is I have but one life to offer in its service." Thank God that America is blessed by such patriots. And rest assured that Director Wray Attorney General Sessions and I will never shirk our duty to protect them from retaliation. The days when criminals could harm America from abroad without fear of consequences are past. If foreign governments choose to give sanctuary to perpetrators of cyber crimes, those governments will need to take responsibility for the crimes, and the individual perpetrators will need to consider the personal cost. But criminal prosecutions and financial sanctions are not a complete solution. We need to take other steps to prevent malign influence. To protect elections, the first priority is to harden our infrastructure. State governments run American elections and are responsible for maintaining cybersecurity, but they need federal help. The Department of Homeland Security takes the lead in helping to protect voting infrastructure, and the FBI leads federal investigations of intrusions. The FBI works closely with Homeland Security to inform election administrators about threats. DHS and FBI provide briefings to election officials from all 50 states about our foreign adversaries' intentions and capabilities. We don't want to wait until after the fact. We want to make sure we give them adequate warnings in advance to try to deter and prevent harm. We also seek to protect political organizations, campaigns, candidates, and public officials. The FBI alerts potential victims about malicious cyber activities and helps them respond to intrusions. It shares detailed information about threats and vulnerabilities. To combat covert foreign influence on public policy, we enforce federal laws that require foreign agents to register with the U.S. government. Those laws prevent people from tricking unwitting Americans while concealing that they are following orders from foreign government handlers. The Department of Justice is stepping up enforcement of the Foreign Agents Registration Act and related laws, and we are providing defensive counterintelligence briefings to local, state, and federal leaders and candidates. Public attribution of foreign influence campaigns can help to counter and mitigate the harm caused by foreign-sponsored misinformation. When people are aware of the true sponsor, they can make better informed decisions. We also help technology companies to counter covert foreign influence efforts. The FBI works with partners in the intelligence community to identify foreign agents as they establish their digital infrastructure and as they develop their online presence. The FBI helps those companies disrupt foreign influence operations by identifying the activities so the companies may consider the voluntary removal of accounts and content that violate their terms of service and deceive their customers. Technology companies bear primary responsibility for securing their products from misuse. Many are now taking greater responsibility for self-policing, including by removing fake accounts. And we encourage them to make it a priority to combat efforts to employ their facilities for illegal schemes. Now, even as we enhance our ability to combat existing forms of malign influence, the danger continues to grow. Advancing technology will enable adversaries to create propaganda in new and unforeseen ways. Our government must continue to identify and counter them. Exposing schemes to the public is an important way to neutralize them. The American people have a right to know if foreign governments are targeting them with propaganda. In some cases, our ability to expose foreign influence operations may be limited by our obligation to protect intelligence sources and methods and defend the integrity of investigations. Moreover, we should not publicly attribute activity to a source unless we possess high confidence that foreign agents are responsible for it. We also do not want to unduly amplify an adversary's messages or impose additional harm on victims. In all cases, partisan political considerations must play no role. We cannot seek to benefit or harm any lawful group, individual, or organization. Our government does not take any official position on what people should believe or how they should vote, but it can and should protect them from fraud and deception perpetrated by foreign agents. Unfettered speech about political issues lies at the heart of our Constitution. It's not the government's job to determine whether political opinions are right or wrong, but that does not leave the government powerless to address the national security danger when a foreign government engages in covert information warfare. The First Amendment does not preclude us from publicly identifying and countering foreign government propaganda. It's not always easy, though, to balance the many competing concerns in determining whether, when, and how the government should disclose information about deceptive foreign activities relevant to elections. That challenge calls for the application of neutral principles. So the Cyber Digital Task Force report identifies factors the Department of Justice should consider in determining whether to disclose foreign influence operations. That policy reflects an effort to articulate neutral principles so that when the issue that the government confronted in 2016 arises again, as it surely will, there will be a framework to address it. Meanwhile, the FBI's Operational Foreign Interference Task Force coordinates investigations of foreign influence campaigns. That task force, which I know Director Wray spoke about yesterday, integrates the FBI's cyber, counterintelligence, counterterrorism, and criminal law enforcement resources to ensure that we understand the threats and respond appropriately. The FBI task force works with other agencies, federal, state, and local, as well as international partners in the private sector. Before I conclude, I want to emphasize that covert propaganda disseminated by foreign agents is fundamentally different from domestic partisan wrangling. As Senator Margaret Chase Smith proclaimed in her famous 1950 Declaration of Conscience, we must address foreign security threats patriotically as Americans and not politically as Republicans and Democrats. President Reagan's Undersecretary of State, Lawrence Eagleburger, wrote about Soviet active measures in 1983. He said that, and I quote, "It is as unwise to ignore the threat as it is to become obsessed with the myth of a super Soviet conspiracy manipulating our essential political processes." Eagleburger maintained that free societies must expose disinformation on a persistent and continuing basis. Over the past year, Congress passed 3 separate statutes encouraging the executive branch to investigate, expose, and counter malign foreign influence operations. Publicly exposing such activity has long been a feature of U.S. law. The Foreign Agents Registration Act, which Congress passed in 1938 to counter Nazi propagandists, mandates that the American public know when foreign governments set out to influence them. Knowledge is power. In 1910, Theodore Roosevelt delivered a timeless speech about the duties of citizenship in great republics. It is best known for his remark that it is not the critic who counts, which is important to keep in mind when you're in Washington, D.C. But Roosevelt's most insightful observation is that the success or failure of a republic depends upon the character of the average citizen. It is up to individual citizens to consider the source and evaluate the credibility of information when they decide what to believe. Heated debates and passionate disagreements about public policy and political leadership are essential to democracy. We resolve those disagreements at the ballot box, and then we keep moving forward to future elections that reflect the will of the citizens. Foreign governments should not be secret participants, covertly spreading propaganda and fanning the flames of division. The government plays a central role in combating malign foreign influence and other cyber threats. The Attorney General's Cyber Digital Task Force report demonstrates that the Department of Justice is doing its part to faithfully execute our oath to preserve, protect, and defend America. I regret that my time today is insufficient to go into great detail about that report. It is available on the Department of Justice website. I hope you will read it and find it to be a useful contribution to public discussion about one of the momentous issues of our time. In brief, the task force report explains that we must continually adapt criminal justice and intelligence tools to combat hackers and other criminals. Traditional criminal justice is most often characterized by a police officer chasing a criminal and an eyewitness pointing out a perpetrator in the courtroom. Cybercrime requires additional tools and techniques. We limit cybercrime damage by seizing or disabling servers, domain names, and other infrastructure that criminals use to facilitate attacks. We shut down dark markets where cyber criminals buy and sell stolen information. We restore control of compromised computers. We share information gathered during our investigations to help victims protect themselves. We pursue restitution, and we seek attribution and accountability for the perpetrators, and we expose governments that defraud and deceive our citizens. The task force report is just one aspect of our efforts. It is a detailed snapshot of how the Department of Justice assesses and addresses cyber threats. That work continues, and not just within our department. Our government is doing more now than ever before to combat cyber-enabled crimes. Trump administration agency appointees and White House officials work with career professionals every day to prevent cybercrime and protect elections. Our adversaries will never relent in their efforts to undermine America, so we must remain eternally vigilant in the defense of liberty and the pursuit of justice. And we must approach each new threat united in our commitment to the principle reflected in the motto adopted at the founding of our republic: E pluribus unum. Thank you very much.